Hello friends, and welcome to the Cursed Image Creepypasta Iceberg 3. I've been busy running through the entirety of the image creepypasta genre, and have found some of the most unique stories. What makes this genre so interesting to me is that people decided to use a photo with their creepypastas. A photo can tell you 1,000 things at once, so a good photo can really make a creepypasta stand out. Sometimes the photos are more interesting than the story themselves. I really enjoy it when a story has a creepy image attached. It really makes me want to read more of it. Some photos are created for the creepypasta, while others come from an outside source, and become forever connected to the story. My favorite is the Jeff the Killer photo, overshadowing its story by a mile. This iceberg also includes image and video creepypastas that are about disturbing photos rather than having actual photos. I'm trying to make every tier have a good mix of stories with and without images attached. Before we start, this video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Raid has over 80 million downloads worldwide, over 650 unique champions to collect, and allows players to customize their champions and team comps in whichever way they'd like. The game has PC, console level graphics for your mobile device. With Raid's unique lore, there are loads of champions with my favorite aesthetic. My current favorites are Harvest Jack, Little Miss Annie, and Morrigan. They all have that perfect Nightmare Fuel aesthetic we love on this channel. Aside from these champions, there are loads of factions to collect characters from, with each having its own unique lore, including High Elves, Lizardmen, Skinwalkers, and my favorite, the Undead Hordes. Champions from these factions and more can be summoned from the portal located in the Bastion. Raid has prepared something special for all new players this Christmas. Get ready to celebrate the 12 days of Raid. Download Raid Shadow Legends from the link below, copy your player ID from in-game, and then go to 12daysofraid.plarium.com, link in the description, enter your player ID, then set out on a fun, festive adventure that lasts 12 days, running from December 19th to January 10th. Each day, experience a new chapter of this wintry story and play a new minigame for a chance to win some amazing in-game and real-life prizes, including holiday-themed Raid champions and even Amazon gift cards worth up to $1,000. Existing Raid players, don't think you're being left out. Head to 12daysofraid.plarium.com where you can find a special holiday promo code that everyone can use for a small festive gift. Raid's also got something extra special happening now. They've released a legendary champion based on MMA and pro wrestling legend Ronda Rousey. You can get Ronda Rousey free right now, and all you have to do is download and play Raid Shadow Legends for 7 days. You can also use promo code RAIDRONDA to get a 3-day 100% experience boost, 500k silver, and 5 full energy refills. And if you haven't started playing Raid yet, click on my link in the description or scan my QR code here on the screen. You'll get unique bonuses worth $35. We're talking a free epic champion, Jotun, 100k silver, 50 gems, and 2 epic skill tomes. All this treasure will be waiting for you here. Available for 30 days for new players only. And once you're in-game, you can find me under the name Sacrow, and if you're fast enough, you can join my clan. Thanks again to Raid for sponsoring this video. I looked through some old family pictures and something doesn't add up. It's a story from No Sleep about a man named Steven noticing something off while going through his family photo album. The story was posted in 2019 by Rain Writer. The story starts with Steven remembering the death of his parents 2 years prior. He missed them dearly, and this led him to look through his family photo album again. There was always one photo that got him, a picture taken when he was really young in front of some restaurant. This leads to Steven deciding to take a trip to find the town and restaurant where the photo was taken. After doing a little research, he determines that the restaurant must be gone because the town he'd visited didn't have one. Instead of giving up, Steven decided to post his family photo on a German subreddit. Most of the replies weren't helpful in the slightest. He gave it a day, but still nothing. Then he saw that he had a message from someone else on Reddit, a name he didn't recognize. A man named Michael had sent him a strange message. The message said that he had a picture that looked identical to the one he posted. Steven responded unsure of what he meant. The next message contained a link, and when he clicked on it, he saw an exact replica of his family photo, but with different people in it. Every detail in the image was identical. The conversation between the two continued, with them realizing that a lot of their family photos were the exact same, save for the people in them. This was starting to creep out Steven, who now had more questions than answers. The two then decided they should meet up. Stephen packs his photo album and goes to Michael's house. They exchange greetings and then begin sifting through the images. Stephen notices Michael's tower of computer monitors on his large desk. The man explains that he does most of his work online. As they go through the photos, they realize that the pictures were taken at different times. Stephen's photos were taken and dated for 2005, while Michael's always dated 13 years prior. Every single photo had a similar amount of time between them. The topic of their parents came up next. Both of their parents had died 2 years prior, but in different ways. The exact date of their deaths, neither of them could remember though. It was starting to puzzle them even more. It was starting to get late, so Stephen decided to make a trip back to his home. He left some of the photos with Michael to examine. Michael also claimed to have a friend that could find out if the photos were doctored in any way. With that news, he left. A day later, Stephen received the text he was waiting for. He was told to check his email by Michael. He did just that and found that the images were in fact doctored. The background of each image was actually taken in the Soviet Union. It wasn't just that original photo either. All of the photos were taken from Soviet propaganda images. Stephen called Michael and the two discussed what they thought was going on. They didn't know why anyone would create these fake images or how they still had memories of these places. Nothing was making sense. Michael said he would get back in touch with his contact and let Stephen know if he heard anything. With that phone call ended, all there was to do was wait. Waiting was the hardest part though. That waiting wouldn't really be rewarded. Stephen got a phone call a few days later from Michael. He claimed to have finally got answers but urged Stephen not to look into it. Before Stephen could ask why, he hung up. Stephen tried everything he could to get into contact with Michael again, but he wasn't able to. His calls would go to voicemail and messages would remain unchecked. A few days passed and there it was in a tabloid. A man had jumped from a bridge. That man was Michael. As soon as work ended, Stephen rushed over to Michael's house and snuck in a window. He found Michael's computer monitor broken and papers all over the ground. A few of the sheets of paper were actually scientific documents. Stage 7. Memory Alteration. Test subjects are infused with artificial memories to create the illusion of a normal life. What the hell was this? I went through this stack and checked another one. Stage 3. Growth Acceleration. Gen manipulation ensures the maturity of test subjects in only a fraction of the normal human growth period. What was I reading? This made no sense. I checked the rest of them, but they were all the same. Stage 4. Mind Acceleration. Stage 8. Social Behavior Therapy. And on it went. I looked through the whole stack until I found the last one. Stage 13. Project Termination and Future Developments. Test subjects show insufficient results. The project was deemed unsuccessful and was to be terminated immediately. The euthanasia of remaining test subjects is considered unnecessary. To be kept under surveillance to gather information about adaptability to society and social norms. As Stephen was sifting through papers, he heard the door being opened. He overheard them talking about Michael and mentioned subjects talking to each other. He didn't want to stick around and took off out the window again. That's when Stephen tries to remember his parents. He had no memory of them other than the photos. He didn't know if they were even real or if anything he knew was. I looked through some old family pictures, something doesn't add up. It appears that Stephen was some sort of experiment. They implanted fake memories, though it was never stated why. The story was interesting enough to read, but the ending was rather lackluster. The photograph is a short creepypasta, so let's read it in full. During one summer in the 1950s, a group of friends found an old abandoned house in the woods. They entered to see what they could find inside. Inside the house, a water hole was dug in the center of the room. 3 of the boys decided to swim while the others stayed dry and took pictures of the house with his camera. 30-some years later, in 1982, a man was hiking and found an old camera. He took it to the local police station to try and find out who it belonged to. The police got the film developed. Most of the photos have been destroyed, save for a few. This picture is the last picture that was taken. It is unknown what happened to the boys' faces or why the series of pictures abruptly ended. The kids have never been identified, and their bodies were never found. What is happening in this image still remains a mystery. This is the image attached, and I really think the picture is the most critical part of this story. The story itself sets up a mystery, but only barely. The idea, on the other hand, is creepy and hard to trace. I think the image really brings up the creepypasta. It makes it scary, and well, it really couldn't exist without it. A creepy photo for sure. Chain letters are messages that people send to others with vague mentions of good luck or harm for not spreading the message. Think like the Smile Dog creepypasta, but in real life. People used to send chain letters all the time, and I've gotten my fair share of them. A lot of chain letters had a bit of a horror-themed connotation. Instead of going through the history of chain letters, I'm just going to go through some of the most popular ones I can find online. Once you read this chain letter, you cannot get out. Finish reading this until it is done. Hi, I am Teddy. I am 7 years old. I have no eyes and blood all over my face. I am dead. This is the start to the Teddy chain letter, and from there it just explains people who died due to not sending the chain letter to anyone. 0 people leads to you dying, 1 to 6 leads to you getting injured, 7 to 11 equals a big fright, and 12 and over is for safety and good fortune. This one is pretty simple and the photo is slightly unnerving. I used to get chain texts like this all the time when I was in high school. Next up is the Clarissa chain letter, a pretty popular one. It reads, "Warning, this is not a joke, carry on reading or you will die. Once there was a little girl called Clarissa. She was 10 years old and she lived in a mental hospital because she killed her mom and dad. She got so bad she went to kill all the staff in the hospital, so the government decided that the best idea was to get rid of her. The rest of the chain letter talks about how they were going to kill Clarissa humanely, but something went wrong and she died in a ton of agony. Now she attacks people who do not forward this chain letter upon receiving it. The image attached is creepy, and I actually remember seeing this one, or one that was similar to it, years ago. These are just some examples of chain letters. Honestly, a really interesting piece of internet urban legend that I might do a whole video on someday. There's just something about a friend sending you this message at 2 AM while you're watching Adult Swim or reading through creepypastas online. The Visitors is a creepypasta that was posted to the Creepypasta Wiki in 2021 for a contest. It was written by Colpic and told the story of a girl named Hannah visiting her old school in a town named Ripley. The story starts with Hannah and her husband Alex taking a detour to a small town called Ripley. The pair pulled up to an old school building. Hannah claimed that she wanted to take a tour of her old school. She calls up the custodian to come and open the school for them. Frank, the custodian, arrives and lets them inside. Frank asks Alex to sit and chat with him while Hannah goes and explores the school. Alex obliges and watches as his wife walks off into the darkness of the building. Hannah is having some sort of flashback as she sees her old elementary school. The school is being set up with an experimental new teaching method. This method would bring in robotic teachers to teach the students. Hannah and 49 other students were brought in to take place in this experiment. The robotic teachers looked more like students with their small stature and big eyes. The robotic teachers were monitored by human teachers during their lesson plans. The test was a massive success. All 50 students saw marginal improvements in their test scores. It seemed like the school would go forward with this lesson plan until this image was put in the local paper. This image unsettled and creeped people out, so they started to pull their kids out of the program. This all led to each of the 50 kids breaking into the school once it was officially closed down and taking a souvenir. Each kid ended up doing this. Separately or together, it didn't matter, they were each drawn to do it. Seeing the school years later, she saw a figure moving in the shadows. The screen on its abdomen lit up and she knew immediately that it was her teacher, number 8. The robotic teacher addressed her by name and asked for her student module. She tried to talk to it but wasn't able to. The robots were not built for communication. They could just list random facts and lesson plans. The robot, even without being able to make facial expressions, looked tired. Hannah gave number 8 her student module, and it thanked her. It sped off towards the back of the building with Hannah following close by. Inside, she saw the other robots all in the exact same position as that photo that was posted in the paper. She saw number 8 go into its position and lower its head, finally able to shut down like the rest. Hannah returned outside, thanked Frank, and set off with her husband. As they were leaving the area, she could see a smoke plume coming from the old schoolhouse. The Visitors is an interesting creepypasta in concept. It's about a woman returning to her old elementary school where something mysterious happened. The overall concept is interesting, but it isn't really all that scary. It leans more heavily into the sadder, sympathetic side of storytelling. I still do like the mystery here though, like who posted that original photo in the newspaper? Why did it look exactly like the way the robots all shut down in the end? Who was paying Frank the custodian to keep the school open until every student returned their student module? The image attached is a great piece of liminal space, which is what the contest was held for, using liminal space images and creating a story around them. I like the image a lot, but the story made it less creepy. Without context, the image is much more unsettling. The ending left a bit of mystery too, so overall a good story. The Man in the Painting is a creepypasta that was uploaded to the Creepypasta Wiki in 2013. The story revolves around a man trying to figure out why the eyes of a painting keep following him wherever he goes. Now he knows the tricks paintings use to have the eyes follow you, and he knows how to break that trick. What he's having issue with is how the painting seems to be able to ignore that trick and continue to follow him. This leads to the man trying to find the artist that created the painting. A website was discovered, and so too was the artist's name, El Pintor de Color, or the Painter of Color. The website had many paintings that resembled the one that he had, but all of them were in linear perspective style. The website also had two names at the bottom. The names were Jose Sanchez and Adamo Baki. This led the man to Google, but for some reason all the results for Adamo led to Jose, so he decided to start his research with Jose. Jose Sanchez had a Wikipedia page, and it turns out that he was murdered when he was 40, bludgeoned to death. The killer was never identified, but it was believed to be Adamo. Adamo would go to court twice and be found innocent both times. There turned out to be a witness that saw Adamo at the crime scene, at a bar, and at a golf course. This is where the story gets a little bit weird to me. Adamo was later murdered. His house burned down with him inside. The only thing that survived the flame was a painting. A trial is being held for the murder of Adamo, and then Adamo walks in and admits to killing himself. This whole reveal feels like it was supposed to be important, but it just felt distracting. Maybe the paintings were coming to life and killing people. Maybe this story was poorly translated. I'm not sure. All I know is that it started off interesting, but then became kinda confusing. Another short creepypasta is, can I stay in your room? Mommy, can I stay in your room tonight? The walls won't stop staring at me. I sighed and rolled out of bed. There's nothing in your room, go back to sleep. But they won't stop staring at me. Come on. I take Will by the hand and guide him back to his room. Walls can't see, Will. They don't have eyes. Mine do. They do, and they keep looking at me. We cross the threshold of his doorway. I set him up on his bed. Pictures of family, past and present, are all hung up and clustered around the room. See, look? Will points to one of the pictures across from his bed, a large portrait of his great-great-grandmother, long deceased. Due to the way the picture was taken, she seems to stare at whatever the picture faces, in this case, Will's bed. That's just an old picture. I can't change that it looks like she's staring. Can you take it down, please? I sigh. Sure. I reach to pull down the old portrait. Her eyes slowly lock with mine. Short and sweet. Not much more to say, really. On to the next one. The Painting is a creepypasta that was uploaded to creepypasta.com in 2012. It's a fairly basic story, but also pretty short. I'm going to narrate it in full. There once was a young artist named Lisa. She was haunted all her life by disturbing dreams. One dream in particular made her dread sleep. It was always the same, a dark hallway and an evil clown pursuing her. Lisa was exhausted from her broken sleep. She was afraid to fall asleep. When she finally drifted off to sleep, she awoke screaming. Her friends and family begged her to get help. She finally decided she couldn't take it anymore and got an appointment with a therapist. Her therapist suggested she paint her dreams. She told Lisa, when you face your fears, you take away their powers. Lisa was doubtful, but willing to do anything to stop the awful dreams. She went home and started painting. She wasn't happy with her first attempt. Something wasn't right. She kept working until the very late of night, then decided to go to sleep. She got in bed and expected to toss and turn as always. The next thing she knew, it was morning. Lisa was shocked. She hasn't slept so easily since she was a child. She was glad, but not excited. She thought it was just a fluke. She got up and brushed her teeth and made some coffee. While she waited for the coffee to brew, she started to work on the painting she had been working on. Something just wasn't working. When she got home from work that day, she started to work on the painting again. Then she knew it was wrong. The eyes. She hadn't got the eyes right. But the part of the dream that was always the most vivid were the eyes. So why was she having such a hard time getting them on canvas? For months, Lisa would stay up late working on the clown's eyes until they were just right. The more she worked, the better she slept. Finally, after months of trying, Lisa made her clown's eyes look as hateful and disturbing as the one in her dreams. After her final brushstroke, something began to happen. The clown from her painting actually began to come out of the painting. Lisa screamed and ran, but tripped over some paint buckets. The last thing Lisa saw was a clown above her wielding a knife, just like the one in her nightmares. When the police found her body, they noticed the piece of art she had been working on. According to the police chief, the painting showed a dark, empty hallway. Another short creepypasta. This story was credited to Dylan Kame Espenson, and I don't think it's a bad story, but it definitely feels lacking. The writing is a whole issue that I won't be going into. Instead, we'll be just talking about the substance of the story. The idea is there, with the girl drawing her nightmares into reality. I kinda like the ending with the clown being gone, but we already knew it would be since we were told the clown crawled out of the painting. If they cut to the part of the story with Lisa being found dead and the clown missing from the painting, I think it would flow a lot better. Still a story that with a few adjustments could be something that we would tell around a campfire. The Wanderer is a creepypasta that was posted on the Creepypasta Wiki in 2010. The story is written like an old urban legend, with an object that causes distress for those that view it. This creepypasta goes through one such tragedy with a girl named Jane. Back in the 1990s, Jane took her own life after seeing an image from a news group. This image didn't have a source. The image depicts a shot of an empty road surrounded by trees. In the middle of the road stands a feminine figure that's translucent to the point that the only way the legs are visible is from the light reflecting from the offset of the camera. It doesn't matter if the image comes from headlights or a flashlight, the thought of coming across this thing with its spider-like arms is terrifying. The figure named the Wanderer was first sighted in 1996 by a college girl named Jane. During a visit with her family, she saw it on an internet board with the caption, "Do you see me? I see you." The reaction to this image was varied. Some grew ill by looking at it, and others just thought it was funny. It wasn't uncommon for images to be posted like this to internet boards. Jane's reaction, though, was more negative. According to her family, she suffered nightmares. She would claim she would see the Wanderer outside her window. Sometimes it would move along the grass, other times it would just stand there. She would find herself unable to move, and if she closed her eyes, she would still be able to see it. Her family tried their best to comfort her and tell her that it wasn't real. This wasn't how she saw it, however. Even in her waking life, it was everywhere. It was following her. It knew her. Jane's family began to grow concerned with her sanity. They were correct to be concerned, as she would start to fight to stay awake as long as she could. First, it started like any all-nighter. She would drink a lot of caffeine and try to stay active. She would later go on to more extreme ways to stay awake by harming herself. This only increased her mom's concern. Jane's mom decides she needs to go check on her and knocks on her door, but is confused when she doesn't get a response. She opens the door to find Jane with a slit across her neck and a note that read, "It won't get me now." The Wanderer is pretty short and provides a story with an image. The story is pretty standard, but the image really brings the piece together. I think the image is ominous and spooky in its own right as well. I don't have much more to say about this one, so let's just move on to the next entry. Have You Seen This Painting of a Hallway is a story that comes to us from the depths of Reddit on the No Sleep subreddit. It was posted by W. Dolphin in 2015 and is told in 2 parts. The story begins with a man telling us about how he'd received a strange painting of a hallway from his dad. His dad had bought it at some auction and thought he would like it. Not thinking much of it, but actually liking the painting, he put it in his office. The painting depicted a hallway with 6 doors and a path that led towards the rest of the house. One day when the narrator had some friends over, they walked into his office to watch some videos on the computer. Mark, the narrator's friend, stops and looks at the painting. Mark claims that the painting is kind of creepy. The narrator doesn't agree and instead says that it's kind of hypnotizing. As the two are looking over the painting, the narrator notices something he didn't see before. There appeared to be a light at the end of the hallway in the painting. It was enough light to cast a bit of a shadow. He thought that was odd, but nothing to really concern himself about. A couple of days later, while working in his office, he glanced over the painting and saw something that sent a chill down his spine. The painting now had 7 doors. The painting's proportions hadn't changed in the slightest, and the door looked like it fit there perfectly. The man tried to explain this to his wife, the weird changes in the painting, but she didn't believe him. How could she? She wasn't even looking at the painting most days. The man decides to monitor the painting more closely to notice any changes. He even takes pictures of it, at the request of his friend Mark. Nothing happened for a few days, but sure enough, a change did happen. The narrator walked into his office and there was a vaguely humanoid shape staring at him in the painting. This creeped him out so much that he decided to throw the painting out altogether. He placed it next to the trash can to get taken out in the morning. With it gone, he had some peace of mind back, until he remembers the photo he took of it. Curiosity got the better of him and he opened the image to notice that it had changed too. The thing in the image now had its arms raised. He sent the image to Mark, but the image said it was corrupted and he couldn't even view it. The creature in the painting inching closer and closer to the front. The painting continues to change, but something catches his eye that isn't related to the creature. One of the doors is now open, and inside you can see a lion's stuffed animal. This caught him off guard as the change had been there before, but it hadn't really dawned on him. The man closes the photo and goes to put his daughter to bed. That's when he sees the same lion's stuffed animal on her floor near her closet. He subtly shuts the door and moves her dresser to block entry. He grabs the lion from the floor and hands it to his daughter, before putting her to bed. When he checked the painting again, he saw that the door was now closed and the lion was no longer there. The paranoia of the painting starts to get to him as he starts to fight with his wife more about it. Eventually she says that she is going to stay with her parents for a while until he can stop obsessing over the painting. He says that he should take some time off too, but knows that he can't due to work. His wife and daughter leave and have to stay in a hotel as their parents' house is a 2-day drive. The man feels helpless but decides to try and relax a little. That's when he gets an email from his friend Mark, telling him to look at the painting again. The email had a picture of the painting attached, and there were now 8 doors. Walking into the 8th door were his wife and daughter. The creature from before was just behind them. When he asked Mark about the image, the only reply he got was, "See you soon." The narrator immediately called his wife. She answered and said that it was perfect timing as they just got to the hotel. They were just about to head down to the pool before it closed. He didn't know how to tell her about the painting since she probably wouldn't believe him anyways. He was about to tell her to leave the hotel when she said they were going to the pool now and hung up the phone. Later that night, the narrator received a phone call from a police officer. His wife and daughter were found dead in the pool. It was said to be an accident. He knew better though, and headed towards the closet. He was ready now to face the creature in the painting. That's Have You Seen This Painting of a Hallway? There are a plethora of haunted painting stories on No Sleep, but this one stood out to me. It's a good story with some good build-up. I like the ending of the story as well, as it really sets up what this creature was going to do. This painting kind of feels like an SCP to me, and that has me very interested. I just wish there was some sort of imagery attached to the creepypasta. Ashbrook Lane is a creepypasta based on the strange trend of weird things being found on Google Images. This story was posted on the Creepypasta Wiki in 2014. The story starts with the narrator recalling his time spent in a house on Ashbrook Lane. His only real memories are of a big tree on the lawn, playing with his He-Man toys, and hanging out with the neighbor's kid. His strongest memories weren't so innocent, however. He remembered he would have vivid nightmares that would happen every night. In these nightmares, he would remember waking up in the early hours of the day, feeling the presence of something lurking in the darkness of his room. He would feel the bed shake and then he would go stiff, afraid to make any movement. He could hear this raspy breathing move from the foot of his bed to the side of his bed, before stopping for a moment. Until a man's breath hit his face, a skinny man in a lab coat would stand before him, with a horrific expression. He tried to scream, but the man in the lab coat grabbed his throat with fingers so skinny you could see the bone. The man ripped him out of his bed and dragged him as he fought to break free. The rest was blurry. He remembered waking up in his parents' bed. They told him he was sleepwalking. These nightmares didn't cease. He would remember waking up and going through it all again the following night. He started to work himself up so much over these nightmares that his parents took notice and let him stay up one night watching TV with them. He didn't go to bed that night. Instead, he sat on the stairs watching the grandfather clock and waiting for the man to appear. Suddenly, a part of the wall started to open up, revealing a doorway. The man came out of it. This time, however, he had blood on his coat. He watched as the man slowly put on his rubber gloves and grabbed a scalpel from his pack. The narrator would run up the stairs as the man behind was chasing. He ran into his parents' bedroom before he could reach their bed, was snatched up by the man, and dragged away from the bed. He grabbed onto the door handle, and despite all the efforts from the man, he could not pull him away. The man from his back pocket pulled out a scalpel, causing the narrator to let go of the doorknob. The man still stabbed him in the hand with a scalpel, and he tried to scream, but nothing came out. The man continued to drag him until the grandfather clock in the hallway let out a single chime, and suddenly, he abandoned his fight. He couldn't tell if everything was in his mind or if anything was actually happening to him at night. He told his parents that all they could do was reassure him. While it wasn't enough since the man would come after him almost every night anyways, the man was growing more violent each night as well. He would use the scalpel on his fingers or under his fingernails, and he would bite his fingers as well sometimes. His greatest fear was being dragged all the way into that room behind the clock and having the wall close behind him. Would he be stuck there with no one able to find him? The nightmares continued until his family finally moved in with his nan for a while. Later, he would ask his parents about the house. His mother said she had weird dreams while in that house. His dad, however, stopped them from talking about it. When he was in his mid-20s, he asked his parents about the house again. This time they were more perceptive. His mother had visions of dead bodies lying on the floor, blood all over the walls, and she claimed she had felt a presence. While alone, she would often hear crying from inside the house. She also revealed that his aunt and uncle had come to stay one weekend and woke in the middle of the night to see the figure of a tall man wandering the room. The building was on sale again, and he decided now was the time to revisit the house. A lady named Andre met him for a tour of the house. As he entered, he felt a shiver down his spine. As they toured the building, he would come across the part of the house where the man used to try and drag him. The narrator gestured toward the wall and asked her what used to be behind that wall. She was caught off guard and started to tell him a clearly fabricated story. It didn't take long for her to realize that he knew more than she originally believed. He told her that he used to live in the house when he was a kid. She agreed to tell him the story, but not in the house. The two went to a nearby coffee shop, and she explained the origins of the house. In 1953, Dr. Henry Fenton moved into Ashbrook Lane with his wife Mary and their teenage son Raymond. The upper floors of the house were where the rooms were set up. His office was set just off the hallway opposite the grandfather clock. Business and life were going well for them until Mary fell down the stairs and broke her neck, killing her instantly. Henry grew distant following this tragedy and started to focus solely on his work and ignore his son. Raymond was struggling to come to terms with his mother's death, his father ignoring him, and his mother's death caused a divide in the family. Raymond soon fell in with the wrong crowd, turning to drugs and alcohol for relief. Henry didn't care or even notice. He was too busy either working or drinking. The drinking led to anger. Henry would throw things around and destroy furniture, though it was his son who bore the brunt of his temper most of the time. This would lead to Raymond leaving to live with his grandparents. One night, Henry was awoken by a noise downstairs. He had been drinking, so emboldened, he decided to confront the intruder. All he had left was his work, and no one was going to take that away from him. He saw a light in another room, as well as the noise of someone rummaging through the cupboards and shelves. Henry snuck into the office and withdrew a scalpel from his drawer. The intruder entered the room. He had a sack on his back and wore a mask. Henry sprung out of the darkness, ordering the robber to drop the sack. The robber panicked and tried to run past him, but Henry would catch the man in the neck with the scalpel. He walks to unmask the robber, and it's Raymond, his son. Henry tried to save his son, immediately applying medical aid. Henry puts his hands on Raymond's throat to stop the bleeding. He then dragged him towards his office. He would try to perform emergency operations, but it was too late. As Raymond was pronounced dead, the grandfather clock in the hallway let out a single chime. The following day, patients turned up to his office to find Raymond cradled in Dr. Fenton's arms. Unable to come to terms with killing his own son, Henry had turned the scalpel upon himself, slashing his own wrists before bleeding to death on the floor of his office. The narrator knew that something was wrong with that house, and it all made sense to him now. In an update, he decided to look at the house on Google Maps. The building looked the same except for an added ramp. Looking closely, he saw what he'd been dreading. In the reflection of the door was the face he'd seen so many times in his nightmares. Ashbrook Lane is a new take on a classic horror story. A house is haunted following a tragic event that happened prior to the person moving in. This one is told well and paced just as well. The story of the doctor taking his own son's life was something I kinda saw coming, but it still had the intended effect. The image from Google Maps at the end of the story looks pretty convincing, which is nice. The image of the doctor in the reflection adds a lot to the story. The images here were used pretty well, I think. I really enjoy it when images are either at the end or beginning of a story. Sometimes there are stories that are not the most well written, but the picture attached makes them worth checking out. That's the case for our next story, Check the Camera. Check the Camera was uploaded to the Creepypasta Wiki in 2011. The story starts with your usual haunted house cliches, hearing footsteps coming up the stairs at night, tapping on windows, and someone walking into other rooms. The sounds didn't really bother the narrator, but really bothers her son. She would wake up some mornings with him lying on her floor. Eventually, even her partner starts to hear noises. There was never anything there when he went to look, though. It was driving him mad. One day, her partner got scratched by whatever entity was haunting them. To skip a bit of the story, eventually her son takes his own life and tells her that he got the creature. She just needs to check the camera. This was the only photo on the roll. Now, I've seen some pretty creepy photos on the internet, but this one activates my fight or flight response. I have an irrational fear of being watched from a window, and this taps so heavily into that. The image is just very creepy overall, though the story is not so great. The Smiling Man is another creepypasta that isn't really about the story itself, at least not for why it's on this iceberg. The creepypasta has an interesting history on the internet, where it started on Reddit before becoming a creepypasta. I just want to talk about this image that's attached to the Smiling Man creepypasta. This image has been burned into my mind since I first saw it 10 plus years ago. It has always invoked a kind of fright in me. I don't want to go into full details about this story, as I think the Smiling Man would work better on my creepypasta cryptids iceberg. The Smiling Man is just a creepy encounter with a really creepy image attached. The last creepypasta on this tier is one that I've seen being mentioned a lot in my comments section. I know this story is pretty popular and should probably be in the first or second tier. It's one that I'd actually forgotten about for some reason, especially since the story is pretty good. Teeth.jpeg was posted on the Creepypasta Wiki in 2013. It's one of the first stories to get Creepypasta of the Month and is looked fondly upon by most of the Creepypasta Wiki users. Though if you go into the comments section, it's pretty divisive. The story of Teeth.jpeg starts with our narrator explaining that they attend an art college. They attend with their 3 friends/roommates. They are Josh, Lily, and Daniel. The narrator explains a bit about each person's artistic interests, but talks about how weird Daniel is. Daniel is weird, but also snobby about his art. He is referred to as a fine artist here. The story picks up after a summer vacation when all the friends return to college and explain what they did over the break. Everyone did mostly normal stuff, except for Daniel. His father is a doctor, and so he went to the hospital with him a lot during the summer. For some reason, he explains that he likes to touch teeth. The four friends thought this was odd, but that's just who Daniel was. A little time later, they were all enjoying their time together until Daniel started to become rude. He would insult the others and just generally start to keep to himself. The narrator and Josh were planning a night out and invited both Daniel and Lily. Lily said she would try and get Daniel to come and not to wait for her. The other two left and had a fun night out. When they returned, they saw that Lily wasn't in her room and neither was Daniel in his. The narrator was a bit nosy and decided to knock on Daniel's door to see if he was inside. To his surprise, the door just came open. Inside was Daniel's laptop just sitting on his bed. That's when he came upon an image file titled Teeth.jpeg. He opened the file and this is the image he saw. The next day, Daniel returned to his room. When he left for lectures again, the narrator decided to show Josh the strange photo he found. They decided they needed to show Lily too, but found that she was still gone. When inspecting her room, they found her phone. They called her girlfriend and found that she hadn't talked to her either. She sent her one text that read, "Help me." The two decided to confront Daniel as he was the last one to see her. The confrontation was as you'd expect, awkward and aggressive. It was clear that Daniel knew more than he was letting on. The narrator and Josh later dug through Daniel's satchel after he'd stormed off into his room. In the satchel, they found a group of photos of Lily smiling with strange phrases on the back. Also inside the satchel was a ticket for two with an address. It would take a few hours to get there, and they decided to go first thing in the morning, while Daniel was in class. The drive took them to a rural part of their area, and specifically to an old worn building. They couldn't figure out how to enter the building until Josh accidentally kicked away a fake part of the wall. This led them down the stairs into a cellar. They entered with trepidation and were immediately hit with a foul odor. Continuing on, they found something they weren't ready for. It was Lily strapped down to a medical table. Her face was contorted with her hand sewn to it. It resembled that image they'd seen on Daniel's computer. The blackness of her mouth and eyes were caused by black wax placed inside them. Just as they were realizing what Daniel had done for the sake of his art, the door behind them closed. Josh had passed out from the adrenaline, and the narrator found himself with no way out. Just as they were imagining how they would meet their end, they heard Lily choking. That's the end of Teeth.jpeg. This story won Pasta of the Month back in 2014 and was a really interesting tale. I will say this story has a lot of plot holes and inconsistencies that hold it back when held under a lens. The biggest to me is how the picture ended up on Daniel's computer so quickly. The time it took them to get home from drinking and then find that image was so quick. I just don't see how Daniel would have time to go and do this to Lily and then come back with his computer already. Unless the image was some art piece and he decided he wanted to recreate it with a real person. I thought the story overall was decent and I really liked that first image. It is memorable and likely to stick with you longer than the story itself. Most of the horror of the story came from this photo. There was also some body horror thrown in, but honestly I am not that scared of body horror. I will take more of this imagery any day though. Hello everyone, thanks for watching my video. This is the third part in the cursed image creepypasta iceberg, and that means we're closing in on the final two parts. I really enjoy searching for these stories and making these icebergs. I'm really looking for any reason to explore the dark side of the internet. Special thanks to my slender tier patron supporters, Blow a Nose, Nora Kingsley, and Scout with a Name. You guys are awesome and it makes content creation so much easier having your support. Thank you to everyone who watches my videos. I really make this content for all of you. I hope to see you all in the next one. Have a good night.